We'll start with Michigan's second starting cornerback job, or the starting cornerback job on the opposite side of the field to Will Johnson, who I think could be an All-American this year. But everybody's wondering who that is going to be, and he said it's still TBD. They haven't had a scrimmage yet. He said those are going to be really important so they can see those guys in game type of reps. He also said it could go into the season as well with who's playing there. He mentioned the versatility. Some guys like Mike Sainer still who could play both outside and at the nickel. He said some safeties can come down and play the nickel as well if they need to go that route. But a guy who we heard from earlier in the week on the In the Trenches podcast with John Jansen, Josh Wallace, who's just an impressive dude, as you would expect from a guy who was a 3-time captain at UMass. But he was fun to listen to, and Jesse Minter said that he has come in and been really impressive so far. He thinks he's going to be a pro. He only has 1 year eligibility left, so that would be next year. This dude's going to be a pro. It's kind of like the Roman Wilson thing. I feel good about Josh Wallace being my likely pick at corner, after kind of hearing more about him. But he's going to have to earn it too. There's going to be competition with some of these other guys as well. But Josh Wallace, a pro right now, he said Mike Sainristil and him are like twin brothers. They're everywhere together. Mike Sainristil has taught him everything about this defense. So pretty positive, I think, to hear coming out of the first 7 practices.
Yeah, when you bring in a guy that is an upperclassman that has played so much college football, I mean, I know there's a lot of excitement around Amorian Walker. I've always maintained I think that's more of a long-term project, kind of a slow burn, slow simmer, so to speak. But when you bring in a guy that has that much experience, one, it's first and foremost, it's insurance. But second of all, those guys don't come here unless they think they have a shot to play a big role. And, we've heard good things about Wallace early on. I talked to Mike Sainer still at Big Ten Media Days. And like I said, Josh Wallace has been in his hip pocket, learning the defense and getting involved in all those types of things. So again, we talk about all these position battles that are going to go into the year. I think cornerback is going to be maybe the one that most goes into the season because, like I said, the last few years we've seen DJ Turner emerge halfway through the 2021 season. It seemed like about halfway through last year, although different circumstances. Jamon Green needed to sit out for a bit. Will Johnson was thrust into a bigger role and never looked back. So at some point, I get the feeling whoever starts at corner to begin the year might not be the guy that starts towards the end of the year. And that's fine. And that's good news for Michigan because it means you have good depth there. We don't know if their depth is good at corner right now. I think we have a lot. We know that they have a lot of guys. There are a lot of pieces there that we're confident can play opposite Will Johnson. And that's the thing too. Keeping Will Johnson healthy is maybe the most important task of this whole fall camp because he's going to take away, a quarter to a third of a field all on his own with what he's able to do. So, whoever emerges at that second corner spot, I think that if he's not able to hold it down on his own, they'll be able to do some schematic things to help those guys out. But so far so good with Josh Wallace.
Who helps the corners, the secondary, they work together. It's a reason why Steve Klinkscale recruits some of the bigger guys on the roster when he has a chance. It's the pass rush. And that has been improved as well, based on what Jesse Minter was talking about. And he said, everyone kind of latched onto the quote from Chris Jenkins back in, I think, January about how they're obsessing over pass rush. They know it has to be better. But he said it really has been an obsession, and Chris Jenkins has been leading the charge there. And he said, that they've kind of taken upon themselves. Obviously, the coaching staff is focusing on that too, but, it's been player-driven. It's been player-led, like a lot of the, success that Michigan's had over the last couple seasons, which is encouraging to me. And he said that Chris Jenkins, just the way he was talking about how, he is becoming an elite pass rusher, even at 305 pounds. It just gave me some more confidence that Chris Jenkins is going to be able to be that guy. And you may not have the Aiden Hutchinson on the outside, but if you can get a little more rush from the inside, if Mason Graham can be better as a pass rusher, maybe than Mozzie Smith, even though he may be, not as good against the run, that sort of thing. If you can piece it together that way, I think you're going to have a real chance to improve that. And Minter said, basically what we've talked about this offseason, they're focusing on having a good enough pass rush with 4 guys on most occasions. You don't want to have to bring guys every single time. Specifically with the edges, though, he, talked about that being another one like quarterback last season that could go into the season where two guys start 1 week, two guys start the next week, that sort of thing. So I don't know if we're going to see those guys emerge, and they're all still going to play a lot anyway. But until the season really starts and they get some of those game reps. But your thoughts on, Jesse Minter talking about the pass rush?
The pass rush is going to be a rotation throughout this year, I think. I mean, we saw last year that, that 4-man group of Taylor Upshaw and Mike Morris and Jalen Harrell and Yabi Oki. Derek Moore was kind of in that mix too. Braden McGregor was in that mix. Those top 4 guys all played a lot of snaps. So I think it's really just a matter of figuring out what that pecking order looks like. And, each one of those guys, I wrote about this earlier today. I did a mailbag post on the website, so feel free to check that out. Each one of those guys has their own share of questions. For McGregor, it's, can you finish plays more consistently? Can you win more of your one-on-ones? For Jalen Harrell, we know that he's kind of a jack of all trades, but can he hone in and be a little more dangerous as a pass rusher? What's the level of competition jump going to be like for a guy like Josiah Stewart? Derek Moore dropped 20 pounds. How is that going to affect his game and getting to the quarterback? So there's a lot to sort out there. I'm intrigued by the fact, I don't know if I've had a chance to talk about this yet, but very intrigued by the fact that Keyshawn Bennett put on, I think, 16 or 17 pounds. He's up to, I think, 6'4", 257, 258. And I've heard some good things about him behind the scenes. TJ Guy, I feel like, could do some things, if given the opportunity. So, all of a sudden, I mean, it's not, this is the thing. And I talked about this in a hit with someone the other day where, Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo was kind of the bar that was set a couple of years ago. But, you always, like, it's always the conversation with Braden McGregor. Oh, well, is he the next Aiden Hutchinson? It's gotten really, I think that's been a hindrance to him. And a lot of times, they talk about how he's been called baby Aiden and things like that. But,
I mean, they look similar.
They do. I mean, it goes back to high school. They similar body types. They look the same. I get that. I think we need to be careful with those type of one, because that bar is so high, and two, when you invoke, it's kind of crazy to say, but as time goes on, when you invoke an Aiden Hutchinson and even really a David Ojabo, like, I think what Aiden Hutchinson did that last season at Michigan makes him, every bit of a legend that, Charles Woodson was. Now, Charles Woodson won a Natty and won the Heisman, but you know what I mean? Like, that's a guy that you could make a case as a Mount Rushmore type of player. So, the bar was set high. I think that the further we get away from that, there'll be a little less of an expectation that one particular guy can be that. But I like this group that they have. I think they'll figure it out and they'll be able to get to the quarterback.
Yeah, and he said Braden McGregor is looking a lot more confident, walking around, putting on some weight this offseason, or at least some more muscle with Ben Herbert in the weight room. And then he was asked by our Chris Ballas, is Josiah Stewart big enough, or does he have the skill and the talent to play on rundowns as well? And Jesse Minter said he believes he can. He's actually a lot more powerful than you would think out of a guy his size at 6'1", 245. And that he can do that he really, it sounds weird, but his power is one of his better strengths right now in practice. So, that I think is really good to hear. But also he said, we should be able to piece it together between, on that side of the field, Jalen Harrell or Josiah Stewart, depending on situation. Same with Braden McGregor and Derek Moore on the other side of the field, depending on situation, depending on who's hot, depending on what the other team is throwing at them. So I think that is going to be, important for them, that they do have that depth, even though they might not have the Aiden Hutchinson. And who does have an Aiden Hutchinson? I mean, defensive player finishing runner-up in the Heisman. I mean, it just doesn't happen. So, I'm feeling better and better, I think, about the edge group here early on in camp. And then the last thing about the defense is, kind of interesting with the offense. You hear about they want to be more balanced. The defense, Jesse Minter has a specific number for the amount of guys that he feels like they can play in the first half of the first game. He wants more guys to be ready than a year ago. And basically, in short, they want to be deeper. But he wants 26 guys to be able to go in the first half of the first game on defense. They had 22 that played in that situation last year in the season opener when it counted, which was not for long, obviously a blowout win. But I feel like they're there. I mean, they are really close to being there. When you look at linebacker, they improved the depth. When you look at defensive tackle, probably numbers wise, they have more capable guys that you would trust in there. Certainly in the secondary as well. I feel like guys like Zeke Berry and Keon Saab have emerged. Corner, just in the fact that you have, several guys vying for that starting job, I think gives you maybe not as much promise there, but more depth, guys that you feel like can compete there. But your thoughts on that? I love listening to Jesse Minter too, because he's so calculated and, with what he's talking about. But I feel like they've really improved the depth on this defense. I
think so too. I mean, we just talked about, 4 guys for sure at edge, as many as 5 or 6. I think you've got probably, I'm not going to go through every position group and do the math, but, I think when you look at each group, you've got at least, 3 or 4 guys that can play and make an impact. And
right.
The fact that they do have a lot of those battles still going on, points to, I think they will hit that number, is what I'm trying to say. So, yeah, their depth is better. It feels like they're more athletic there across the board as well. And that's what you have to be, to compete on the national stage. So I think they're in a really nice spot here.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think also, too, you hear about the competition, and there were a couple of good questions asked about, how do you kind of balance competition and the camaraderie and getting these guys to play together as one. And an example that Jesse Minter brought up was that nobody is in the film room or meeting on the side more with Ernest Hausman, who's pushing for a starting job, than Michael Barrett, who has the starting job. And that kind of speaks to it. It's the same thing that Sharon Moore talked about on the offensive line, where you have these guys going on fishing trips, hanging out, playing video games after practice in the summer, working out together, but they're also vying for a limited amount of starting spots, a limited amount of snaps. But I feel like they've done a really good job with the culture, as we know.